Max clutched his teddy bear tighter as the strange sounds from Mommy's room grew louder. Something was wrong. At 6 years old, he knew the difference between normal nighttime noises and the ones that made his tummy feel tight and scared. A moan, then a cry. Not like Mommy's usual crying that happened more and more since Daddy left for his job, far away. This was different. Max slipped out of his dinosaur-printed sheets and padded across the cold floor in his Superman pajamas. "Mommy," he whispered, pushing her door open. The room smelled funny. Mommy was on the bed, curled around her big belly that had been growing for months. She told him a baby brother was in there, getting ready to meet them. But her face looked wrong, all white and wet with sweat, her eyes squeezed shut. "Max!" she gasped, seeing him. "Go! Get Grandpa!" Max nodded and ran to Grandpa's room down the hall. Grandpa had moved in after Daddy left. He took his heart medicine every night that made him sleep really hard. "Grandpa, wake up!" Max shook the old man's shoulder. Grandpa didn't move. "Grandpa, Mommy needs help." Nothing. Just the deep medicine sleep that even Max's loudest voice couldn't break. When Max returned to Mommy's room, something had changed. A tiny crying sound, higher than anything he'd heard before, filled the space. Mommy was holding something small wrapped in her nightshirt. "Max," she whispered, her voice shaky, "this is your brother." The tiny red face peeking out didn't look like the babies in his picture books. This baby was messy and wrinkled, with a tuft of dark hair plastered to his head. "He came too fast," Mommy said, her eyes fluttering. "Need to get hospital." Max stepped closer, fascinated by the tiny fingers that curled and uncurled. "He's so small." "Listen carefully," Mommy said, her words slurring slightly. "Something's wrong. I can't get up. You need to take him." "Take him where?" Max asked, confused. "Portland Medical Center, 5 blocks down. Remember where we visited Cousin Sarah?" Her breathing was getting funny. "Wrap him tight. Keep him warm. Tell them Emily Foster needs help." Thunder cracked outside, making Max jump. Rain began pattering against the window. "But it's raining," Max said. "Please, baby. You're a big boy now. Your brother needs you." Max had never seen Mommy look so scared. She carefully transferred the bundle to his arms, showing him how to support the baby's head. "Hold him close. Don't drop him. Go straight there." The baby felt heavier than Max expected, but lighter than his backpack. The tiny face scrunched up against his chest. "What's his name?" Max asked. "Jamie," Mommy whispered. "His name is Jamie." Max nodded solemnly. "I'll take care of Jamie." Mommy's eyes filled with tears. "My brave boy. Go now. Quickly." Max carried his brother to his room. He grabbed his blue blanket, the special one Daddy gave him, and wrapped it around Jamie for extra warmth. Then he slipped on his rain boots by the front door. Outside, the rain fell in heavy sheets. The streetlights cast yellow pools on the wet sidewalk. Max pulled his blanket higher over Jamie's head and stepped into the storm. "Don't worry," he whispered to the tiny bundle in his arms. "I know the way." The night enveloped them. A 6-year-old boy in Superman pajamas and rain boots, carrying his newborn brother through the darkness, determined to reach the bright lights of the hospital that glowed in the distance like a lighthouse guiding him home. The rain pelted Max's face as he tightened his grip on baby Jamie. Each step splashed cold water up his pajama pants, but he couldn't think about that now. The blue blanket was getting wet at the edges, so he hunched over, trying to shield his brother from the storm. "It's okay," Max whispered, though Jamie's cries grew louder. "I know it's cold." A car whooshed past, spraying water onto the sidewalk. Max jumped back, heart pounding. Mommy never let him walk alone, especially not at night. But Mommy needed help too, and Grandpa wouldn't wake up. The weight of Jamie grew heavier with each block. Max's arms trembled, but he remembered what Mommy had shown him. Always support the head. He shifted his grip, pulling Jamie closer to his chest. Lightning flashed, illuminating the empty street. One of Max's rain boots filled with water from a puddle he misjudged. The squelching sound reminded him of the time Daddy took him fishing before he left for his important job overseas. "Daddy would be proud of us," Max told Jamie, who had momentarily quieted. "He always says Fosters are brave." The wind picked up, rustling the trees along Mrs. Peterson's yard. Max knew this street. They walked it to the park on sunny days. 2 more blocks to go. His arms burned, and his fingers were growing numb from clutching the blanket so tightly. Jamie started crying again, a sound that pierced through the rainfall. The tiny face was scrunched up, turning redder by the minute. "Shh, we're almost there," Max promised, though he wasn't sure if babies could understand words yet. His kindergarten teacher, Mrs. Wilson, had a baby once. She showed the class pictures, but never brought him to school. Max wondered if all babies were this small and loud. The street sloped downward, making Max walk carefully to keep his balance. He couldn't risk falling, not with Jamie in his arms. Each step was deliberate, his eyes focused on the ground, searching for hidden puddles or sticks that might trip him. A group of teenagers huddled under the awning of Malone's corner store. Max crossed to the other side of the street, remembering Mommy's warnings about strangers. One of them called out something, but the rain drowned out their words. "Just keep walking," Max told himself, repeating the phrase Mommy used when they passed homeless people downtown. The hospital's emergency sign glowed red in the distance. Max had never felt so relieved to see a building before. The lights seemed to pull him forward, promising warmth and help. Jamie's cries had weakened, which worried Max more than the loud wailing. The baby felt colder now, despite the blanket. Max broke into a careful jog, his rain boots heavy on his feet. "Almost there, Jamie. Just hold on." The automatic doors of the emergency entrance were just ahead. Max remembered coming here when he broke his arm falling from the backyard tree. Daddy had carried him then, strong arms making him feel safe despite the pain. Now it was Max's turn to be the strong one. A crack of thunder shook the sky as Max finally reached the hospital entrance. The doors slid open, releasing a rush of warm air that felt like a hug after the cold rain. Water dripped from his Superman pajamas onto the shiny floor. Inside, people in scrubs moved quickly between rooms. A lady sat behind a big desk, typing on a computer. No one noticed him at first, just a soaking, wet boy in pajamas and rain boots, standing in the entrance with a bundle in his arms. Max took a deep breath and stepped forward. His voice came out smaller than he intended. "Please help. This is my brother Jamie. He was just born, and my mommy is sick." The chaos that erupted in the emergency room was immediate. A nurse with kind eyes rushed forward, kneeling to Max's level, while another called urgently for a doctor. The bundle in Max's arms was gently lifted away, revealing Jamie's tiny face, now with a bluish tint that made the adults exchange worried glances. "His name is Jamie," Max said, suddenly afraid to let go. "I carried him really careful." "You did an amazing job," the nurse assured him, guiding him to follow as they whisked the newborn toward a room with bright lights and machines. "Can you tell me your name and where your mommy is?" "I'm Max Foster. Mommy's at home. She's sick too. She told me to bring Jamie here." More adults in scrubs appeared, surrounding the small table where they placed Jamie. Max tried to see past them, but a security guard gently steered him to a chair nearby. "Stay right here, buddy. We need to help your brother first. Then we'll help you find your mom." A woman in a dark blue uniform approached, a police officer with a silver badge. She crouched beside Max, her expression gentle but serious. "Max, I'm Officer Rivera. Can you tell me your address? We need to check on your mom." Max recited the address he'd memorized for kindergarten safety day, suddenly realizing how wet and cold he was. His teeth chattered as he explained about Mommy and the baby coming too fast, about Grandpa taking medicine that made him sleep too deeply to hear Max's calls for help. She told me to bring Jamie here, 5 blocks down, just like when we visited Cousin Sarah. Officer Rivera nodded, speaking quietly into her radio. Words like welfare check and possible medical emergency floated around Max as a different nurse wrapped a warm blanket around his shoulders and brought him hot chocolate in a small paper cup. Through a doorway, Max caught glimpses of the medical team working on Jamie. So many people for such a tiny baby. Machines beeped, voices called for things Max didn't understand. The words hypothermia and umbilical cord and possible trauma drifted toward him. A doctor emerged, heading straight for the phones at the nurses' station. Call NICU. We need a team down here, Stat. And contact child services. Max sipped his hot chocolate, not understanding why everyone looked so worried. He'd done what? Mommy asked. He'd brought Jamie to the hospital. He'd been careful. The storm outside intensified, rain lashing against the windows. Lightning illuminated the parking lot in brief, ghostly flashes. Officer Rivera returned, squatting beside Max. Again. Max, some police officers went to your house. They're helping your mommy right now and bringing her to the hospital in an ambulance. Is she okay? Max asked, his small voice nearly lost in the bustle of the emergency room. Officer Rivera hesitated. She needs doctors, just like your baby brother. You did exactly the right thing coming here. A new person arrived, a woman with curly hair and a tablet computer. She introduced herself as Ms. Phillips from Child Services. Max didn't understand what that meant, but she smiled at him like his teacher did when he was upset. Max, you've been incredibly brave tonight, she said. I'm going to stay with you while the doctors help your family. Max looked down at his Superman pajamas, now damp and wrinkled. The cape design on the back was barely visible through the water stains. Like Superman? He asked quietly. Miss Phillips nodded, her eyes shining with what might have been tears. Even braver than Superman. He's a grown-up. You're just a little boy who did something extraordinary. Outside, thunder crashed as the storm reached its peak, echoing the turmoil that had only just begun for the Foster family. The hospital waiting room felt too big for Max, his tiny frame dwarfed by the adult-sized chair. His rain boots left puddles on the polished floor as his legs swung back and forth, not reaching the ground. Clutching the warm blanket around his shoulders, he replayed the journey that had brought him here, the 5 blocks that had seemed like miles in the storm. Can you tell me more about how you got here with your brother? Miss Phillips asked, gently, her tablet ready to record his story. Max nodded. I walked really careful. I remembered the way because Mommy showed me when Cousin Sarah had her appendix out. The memory was clear. Mommy pointing out landmarks as they walked to visit Cousin Sarah, the big oak tree with the swing, the blue house with the funny mailbox, shaped like a fish, the corner where the ice cream truck always stopped in summer. It was raining really hard, Max continued. I tried to keep Jamie dry with my special blanket. Daddy gave it to me when I was little. Ms. Phillips wrote something down. That was very thoughtful of you. Jamie cried a lot at first, but then he got quiet. Max's forehead wrinkled. Is that why the doctors looked scared? Because he was too quiet? Before Ms. Phillips could answer, Dr. Cameron approached. The same doctor who had rushed Jamie away earlier. His face looked tired, but not as worried as before. Your brother is stable now, Max. That means he's doing better. The doctor knelt down to Max's eye level. The nurses tell me you carried him 5 blocks in the rain. Max nodded. I didn't drop him. Not even once. I held his head like Mommy showed me. Dr. Cameron's expression softened. You may have saved his life. Newborn babies can get very cold very quickly, especially in the rain. But you kept him warm enough with your blanket and your body heat. Pride swelled in Max's chest. He hadn't known he was saving Jamie's life. He'd just been doing what Mommy asked. But it felt good to know he'd done something important. There, Was a car that splashed us, Max remembered suddenly. I got really wet, but I turned so Jamie wouldn't. Ms. Phillips and Dr. Cameron exchanged a look over Max's head. Did anything scary happen on your walk? Ms. Phillips asked carefully. Max thought about the teenagers at the corner store, the dark shadows between streetlights, the thunder that made him jump. But scariest of all had been the responsibility, the feeling that Jamie's tiny life depended on his 6-year-old hands. I was scared I might get lost, he admitted, but I remembered all the places Mommy showed me. The red mailbox, the house, with the big dog, the store where we buy candy sometimes. What about your mommy? Dr. Cameron asked. Was she acting differently before you left? Max thought about Mommy's pale face, how her words slurred together at the end, how scared she looked. She told me she couldn't get up. She never lets me go outside alone at night, but she said I had to take Jamie. That's how I knew it was really important. Officer Rivera appeared in the doorway, her expression grave as she motioned for Dr. Cameron. They spoke in hushed tones, while Ms. Phillips distracted Max with questions about his favorite subjects in school. But Max wasn't fooled. Something was wrong. He could tell by the way the adults kept looking at him with sad eyes. The storm outside had eased, but Max sensed that the real storm in his life was only beginning. The automatic doors of Portland Medical Center hissed open as Max stepped through, carrying his precious bundle. The stark contrast between the howling storm outside and the bright fluorescent lights inside momentarily disoriented him. Water pooled beneath his Superman rainboots, creating tiny puddles that marked his path into the emergency room. The waiting area buzzed with nighttime activity. A man cradling his bandaged hand, an elderly woman in a wheelchair, a teenager with an ice pack pressed to his forehead. No one immediately noticed the small boy in soaked pajamas clutching a baby wrapped in a wet blue blanket. Max stood just inside the entrance, suddenly overwhelmed by the vastness of the hospital compared to his tiny stature. Jamie whimpered softly against his chest, the sound barely audible above the steady drone of voices and beeping machines. "Excuse me," Max finally said, his voice so small it disappeared into the ambient noise. He took a deep breath and tried. Again, remembering how Mommy had taught him to speak up when something was important. "Excuse me, my brother needs help." The second attempt caught the attention of a nurse passing by with a clipboard. She glanced down, initially with the distracted look of someone with too many tasks, before her eyes widened in shock. "Oh my God," she whispered, immediately crouching to Max's level. "Sweetheart, what are you doing here alone?" Before Max could answer, she noticed the bundle in his arms. With gentle hands, she pulled back the edge of the wet blanket to reveal Jamie's tiny face, now alarmingly still and tinged blue around the lips. "I need help here," she called out, her professional calm giving way to urgency. "Newborn in distress! Dr. Patel to emergency! Stat!" The waiting room erupted into motion. Another nurse rushed over with a rolling bassinet. A security guard approached, radio already in hand. The admitting desk nurse abandoned her computer to join the growing circle around Max. "My name is Max Foster," he announced, remembering what Mommy had told him to say. "This is my brother Jamie. He was just born at our house. Mommy couldn't get up to bring him, so I did." The first nurse carefully lifted Jamie from Max's arms, unwrapping the wet blanket to place him in the dry warmth of the bassinet. Max's arms felt strangely empty without their burden, suddenly light after carrying his brother for 5 long blocks. "Where is your mother, sweetie?" the admitting nurse asked, already dialing the phone. "At home with Grandpa. Grandpa takes medicine that makes him sleep really hard. Mommy told me to tell you she needs help too. Her name is Emily Foster." A doctor rushed in, Dr. Patel according to her name tag, and immediately began examining Jamie. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, checking vital signs, listening to his tiny chest with a stethoscope. Hypothermia, possible hypoxia, she announced. Get him to Trauma 2 and call NICU. We need warming protocols started immediately. As they whisked Jamie away, Max tried to follow, his wet footprints trailing behind him. "My brother," he protested. "I need to stay with him. I promised Mommy." The security guard intercepted him gently. "They're going to take good care of your brother's son. Right now, we need to get you warm and dry, too. You've done an amazing job getting him here. You can rest now." But Max couldn't rest. Not with Jamie out of sight. Not with Mommy still at home. Not when he'd promised to take care of his little brother. The storm outside had finally passed, but inside the emergency room, the real tempest was just beginning. The hospital seemed to swallow Max whole. Big people in colorful scrubs rushed around him, their voices overlapping in a confusing jumble of medical terms and urgent instructions. Someone had draped a clean blanket over his shoulders and given him dry socks, but he still wore his damp Superman pajamas, the fabric clinging uncomfortably to his skin. A kind-faced nurse named Jackie had brought him a paper cup of hot chocolate and a sandwich, but Max couldn't eat. His tummy felt tight with worry. Where was Jamie? Where was Mommy? When could they all go home? "Max?" A woman in a white coat approached, clipboard in hand. "I'm Dr. Chen. I've been taking care of your brother." Max sat up straighter. "Is Jamie okay? He got really quiet in the rain." Dr. Chen sat beside him, adjusting her glasses. "Jamie is getting stronger. We have him in a special bed that's helping warm him up. He was very cold when you brought him in." "I tried to keep him warm with my blanket," Max said, his lower lip trembling, "but it got wet." "You did an amazing job," Dr. Chen assured him. "Not many 6-year-olds could have done what you did. Can you tell me more about what happened at home?" Max's small fingers fidgeted with the edge of the blanket as he recounted the night's events, hearing Mommy's strange sounds, finding Grandpa impossible to wake, watching Mommy holding the tiny baby who had somehow appeared. "She looked scared," Max explained. "She said Jamie came too fast and she couldn't get up. She told me I had to take him to the hospital because he needed help." Dr. Chen nodded, writing something down. "And your Mommy, was she bleeding? Do you remember seeing blood?" Max thought hard, his forehead wrinkling with concentration. "Yes? On the bed? I think that's why she couldn't get up." Dr. Chen exchanged glances with Officer Rivera, who had been standing quietly nearby. More grown-up worry looks that made Max's stomach feel funny. "The ambulance brought your Mommy in a little while ago," Dr. Chen said gently. "She's with other doctors who are helping her. Can I see her and Jamie too?" "Soon," Dr. Chen promised. "First, can you tell us about any other grown-ups we could call? Is your daddy nearby?" Max shook his head. "Daddy's far away helping." "Soldiers! He's a doctor too, like you. Grandpa lives with us, but he takes his special medicine at night." As if on cue, the emergency room doors slid open, and an elderly man in rumpled clothes burst in, his white hair disheveled and eyes wild. With panic, a police officer followed close behind. "Max!" the old man called, spotting him immediately. "Grandpa!" Max jumped up, relief washing over him. Harold Foster rushed forward, dropping to one knee despite his arthritic joints, and pulled Max into a fierce hug. "My God, boy, I had no idea. The police woke me. Emily, the baby." His voice broke. "I found my brother Grandpa," Max said, a hint of pride breaking through his fear. "His name is Jamie. I carried him all the way here in the rain because Mommy couldn't." Grandpa pulled back, his weathered hands gently cupping Max's face, eyes filling with tears. "You brave, brave boy." The fluorescent lights of the hospital interview room buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows on the plain walls. Max sat at a small table, legs swinging freely as they didn't reach the floor. A box of crayons and some paper had been provided, but he wasn't interested in drawing. His eyes kept darting to the door, hoping someone would bring news about Jamie or Mommy. Grandpa sat beside him, looking older than Max had ever seen him. His normally neat appearance was disheveled, shirt buttoned wrong, one shoelace untied, hair uncombed. His weathered hands trembled slightly as he filled out paperwork. "When can we see Mommy?" Max asked for what felt like the 100th time. "Soon," Grandpa answered, the same response he'd given all morning. "The doctors are still helping her." The door opened, and Detective Powell entered with Ms. Phillips from Child Services. They pulled chairs across from Max and Grandpa, arranging their notebooks and recording devices with practiced efficiency. "Max, we need to ask you some more questions about last night," Detective Powell said gently. "I know you've already told your story many times, but each detail helps us understand what happened." Max nodded solemnly. He'd already spoken to nurses, doctors, police officers, and now this detective with the kind eyes and serious mouth. "Did your mommy say anything else before you left with Jamie? Anything about why she couldn't come to the hospital herself?" Max closed his eyes, trying to remember every word. "She said Jamie came too fast. She said she couldn't get up. Her voice was getting all whispery at the end, and she looked really white, like paper. And she didn't call 911. This from Ms. Phillips, her pen poised above her notepad. Grandpa shifted uncomfortably. "The landline was disconnected last month. Budget cuts at the factory where I worked meant smaller pension checks. Emily has a cell phone, but it was charging in the kitchen," Max added helpfully. "Mommy always plugs it in at night." The adults exchanged glances, weighted with meaning Max couldn't decipher. "Harold," Detective Powell addressed Grandpa directly, "you mentioned taking medication that makes you sleep deeply. What exactly were you prescribed?" Grandpa's face flushed with shame. "Ambien, plus a pain reliever for my back. I've been having trouble sleeping since my daughter-in-law's condition worsened. I never thought. I should have heard something." Max tugged at his grandfather's sleeve. "Grandpa, why does everyone keep asking the same questions? Did I do something wrong by taking Jamie to the hospital?" "No, absolutely not," Detective Powell answered firmly. "You did everything right, Max. We're just trying to understand why your mommy didn't get help sooner, before Jamie was born." Max considered this. "Mommy's been sad a lot since Daddy went away. Sometimes she forgets to make dinner or take me to school. Grandpa helps, but he forgets things too sometimes." The weight of this innocent observation hung in the air. Miss Phillips made several notes, her expression carefully neutral. "Is my daddy coming home now?" Max asked suddenly. "Because of Jamie and Mommy?" Grandpa placed a gentle hand on Max's shoulder. "I left a message with his unit commander. We haven't heard back yet." The questions continued, but the answers remained elusive. Why had Emily hidden her labor until it was too late? Why send a 6-year-old into a storm rather than wake her? Father-in-law, what had happened in those critical moments after birth? For Max, the biggest question remained unspoken. When would his family be whole again? Harold Foster sat alone in the hospital cafeteria, a cold cup of coffee untouched before him. The harsh, fluorescent lights highlighted every line in his weathered face, the bags under his eyes, the tremor in his hands. In the 6 hours since the police had pounded on his door, he'd aged a decade. The memories of the night haunted him in vivid flashes. The sudden awakening to uniformed officers in his bedroom, the paramedics rushing to Emily's room, the blood-soaked mattress, and worst of all, the empty house with no sign of Max or the baby. "Mr. Foster?" Harold looked up to find Dr. Chen standing beside his table, her white coat pristine despite the early hour. "Emily is stable now," she said, taking the seat across from him. "She experienced severe postpartum hemorrhaging, but we've managed to stop the bleeding. She's receiving blood transfusions and will need time to recover." Harold nodded, relief, momentarily overshadowing his guilt. "And the baby, Jamie? He's responding well to treatment. His body temperature has normalized, and his breathing is steady. Considering the circumstances, he's remarkably resilient. Like his brother, Harold murmured. Max carried him through that storm, while I slept through it all. The words hung heavy in the air between them. Dr. Chen's expression remained professional, but her eyes held no judgment. I take medication, Harold continued, needing to explain, to confess. For pain, for sleep. Emily's pregnancy was difficult. She's been depressed since James deployed. I started taking stronger doses just to get through the nights. His voice caught. I should have heard her. I should have been the one to help. Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly. Mr. Foster, why didn't Emily call an ambulance when her labor started? Harold stared into his coffee. The phone? We had to disconnect the landline. Money's been tight. Emily has a cell phone, but... He trailed off, realizing how inadequate every explanation sounded. Did Emily receive any prenatal care? Dr. Chen pressed gently. Harold's silence was answer enough. Mr. Foster, social services will be asking these questions and more. They'll want to know why a 6-year-old boy was the only available help during a medical emergency. The weight of responsibility crashed down on Harold's shoulders. He'd failed them all. His son James, fighting overseas. Emily, suffering in silence. Newborn Jamie entering the world in crisis, and Max, forced to shoulder an adult's burden. I fell asleep, Harold whispered, tears finally breaking free. I took my pills and fell asleep while my daughter-in-law gave birth alone, while my grandson carried a newborn through the rain. I failed them. Dr. Chen's pager beeped. She checked it quickly, then stood. Emily's asking for Max. I think it would help them both to see each other. Harold nodded, wiping his eyes with a paper napkin. As he followed Dr. Chen through the hospital corridors, he made a silent vow. No more pills. No more sleeping through crises. No more failing the family that needed him. The sleeping grandfather had finally awakened. The meeting room on the 3rd floor of Portland Medical Center had been temporarily converted into a command center of sorts. On one side sat Dr. Chen and Dr. Patel, medical charts spread before them. Opposite were Detective Powell and her partner, Detective Morrison, case notes and photographs arranged in precise order. At the head of the table, Ms. Phillips represented Child Protective Services, her tablet displaying relevant regulations and protocols. Outside in the hallway, Max sat with a hospital volunteer who was reading him a story about dragons, blissfully unaware of the serious discussion taking place behind closed doors. Emily Foster's physical condition has stabilized, Dr. Chen began, tapping her pen against the medical chart. However, her mental state is concerning. She's exhibiting signs of severe postpartum depression, possibly exacerbated by pre-existing depression related to her husband's deployment. Was there any evidence of prenatal care? Detective Powell asked, though she suspected the answer. Dr. Chen shook her head. None. No vitamins, no checkups, nothing in our system or any other hospital in the area. The baby was small, but not dangerously so, approximately 8 pounds. And the child's condition? Miss Phillips prompted. Jamie is responding well, Dr. Patel interjected. His body temperature is normalized, and he's taking formula. The hypothermia was significant, but caught in time to prevent permanent damage. We're monitoring for infection, but so far he appears remarkably resilient. Thanks to his brother, Detective Morrison muttered, the first words he'd spoken since the meeting began. Miss Phillips turned to the detectives. What about the home situation? The grandfather mentioned financial difficulties. Detective Powell nodded. The house is in significant disrepair. Utilities are functioning but barely. Refrigerator nearly empty. We found evidence of the birth. In the master bedroom, soiled linens, makeshift towels. No baby supplies whatsoever, no diapers, no formula, no crib. Suggesting this pregnancy was either unplanned or ignored, Miss Phillips concluded. Or denied, Dr. Chen added. It's not uncommon with severe depression. What about the father, James Foster? Detective Morrison asked. Military deployment. In Afghanistan, Detective Powell answered. We've contacted his commanding officer. Given the circumstances, they're working on emergency leave, but it could be days before he arrives. And the grandfather? Ms. Phillips asked. Harold Foster, 72, widowed, retired factory worker with a modest pension. No criminal record. Detective Powell flipped through her notes. He admits to taking prescription sleep medication that prevented him from hearing Emily in distress. Which left a 6-year-old as the only available help, Miss Phillips said, the implication clear in her tone. The room fell silent as they all considered the remarkable actions of young Max Foster. What happens now? Dr. Patel finally asked. Ms. Phillips straightened her papers. For the immediate future, both children will remain here. Once Jamie is cleared for release, we'll need to determine appropriate placement. Given the circumstances, temporary foster care may be necessary until we can fully assess the home situation and Emily's capacity to parent. And Max? Dr. Chen asked. He's showing remarkable resilience, but this has been traumatic. One thing at a time, Ms. Phillips replied. First, let's focus on the physical well-being of both children. Then we can address their emotional needs and hope their father makes it home soon. Dr. Patel's hands froze mid-examination as she carefully turned Jamie onto his stomach. The overhead lights of the NICU illuminated what she'd initially missed during the emergency intake. A pattern of small, circular marks on the newborn's back, unmistakable in their origin and deliberate in their placement. Nurse Williams, she called quietly, would you ask Dr. Chen to join us, please, and page Detective Powell. Max sat in a recliner chair beside Jamie's bassinet, coloring a picture of a superhero that looked suspiciously like himself. He'd been allowed to visit his brother after changing into clean clothes donated by the hospital staff, a dinosaur t-shirt and jeans that were slightly too large. Is something wrong with Jamie? Max asked, noticing Dr. Patel's changed demeanor. I just need another doctor to look at something, Dr. Patel replied, keeping her voice casual while draping a small blanket over Jamie to hide the marks. Within minutes, Dr. Chen arrived, followed shortly by Detective Powell. Dr. Patel led them to a corner of the room, speaking in hushed tones, while occasionally glancing toward Max, who was now showing his drawing to his sleeping brother. Cigarette burns, Dr. Patel whispered. 5 of them, deliberately placed along his spine. They're fresh, likely inflicted immediately before or after birth. Detective Powell's face hardened. You're certain they're not accidental marks from the birth? Absolutely certain, Dr. Chen confirmed, after viewing the evidence herself. These are deliberate burns, consistent with someone holding a lit cigarette against the skin. The pattern suggests methodical placement. The grandfather doesn't smoke, Detective Powell noted. Emily does, according to her medical history. The 3 women looked toward Max, innocently coloring beside his brother's bassinet, unaware of the horrific discovery. I need to document this and collect evidence, Detective Powell said. This changes things significantly. Those burns elevate this case from potential neglect to physical abuse of a newborn. How should we handle Max? Dr. Chen asked. He's been through enough trauma already. Let me talk to him, Detective Powell suggested. Children often notice more than adults realize. He might have seen something without understanding its significance. She approached Max with a gentle smile, pulling up a small chair beside him. That's a great superhero drawing. Is that you saving Jamie? Max nodded proudly. That's me bringing him to the hospital in the rain. I'm making it for Mommy so she won't be sad anymore. Max, Detective Powell began carefully, When you were at home with your mummy and Jamie was just born, did you see anyone else in the house? Max's crayon paused mid-stroke. No, just Mummy and Grandpa, but Grandpa was sleeping. Did you see anyone smoking around Jamie? Max's eyes widened slightly. Mummy sometimes smokes, but Daddy doesn't like it. She goes outside. He hesitated, then added in a whisper, she was crying and smoking when Jamie was crying. She said he wouldn't stop making noise. Detective Powell's trained, neutral expression never wavered, though her heart sank at the implications of Max's innocent revelation. Thank you for telling me, she said. You're being very helpful. The foster home on Pine Street told a story that words could not adequately convey. Detective Powell and Detective Morrison moved methodically through the small house, documenting everything with photographs and careful notes. Yellow police tape cordoned off the master bedroom, where Emily had given birth alone, the sheets still soaked with blood, despite Max's 6-hour absence. In the kitchen, a stack of unpaid bills sat beneath a refrigerator magnet. Electricity warnings, past due notices for water, a final disconnection notice for the landline phone. The refrigerator itself contained little more than condiments, a half-gallon of milk just past its expiration date, and some withered vegetables. A child's lunchbox, decorated with dinosaurs, sat empty on the counter. No baby supplies, Detective Morrison noted, opening and closing cabinets. No formula, no diapers, not even a bassinet or crib. Nothing to suggest they were preparing for a newborn. Detective Powell nodded grimly, examining a collection of prescription bottles on the kitchen windowsill. Harold wasn't exaggerating about his medication. Strong sleep aids, pain management for arthritis, blood pressure regulation. In the living room, evidence of a once orderly life remained. Family photographs showing happier times. A wedding picture of James and Emily Foster, her smile radiant as she looked up at her husband in military dress uniform. Another showed Max as a toddler, perched on his father's shoulders at what appeared to be a county fair. The most recent showed only Max and his grandfather at a school function, Emily conspicuously absent. Check this out, Detective Morrison called from the hallway. A trail of tiny, water-soaked footprints led from the master bedroom to Max's room, then to the front door. The determined path of a 6-year-old boy carrying his newborn brother to safety. Max's bedroom revealed a child trying to maintain normalcy amid chaos. His bed was neatly made, Superman sheets pulled tight in a way that suggested self-discipline rather than parental oversight. School papers with gold stars were taped carefully to the wall. On his small desk sat a handmade calendar with days, crossed off, counting down to his father's return. He's been raising himself, Detective Powell observed softly. In Emily's bedside drawer, they found an unopened package of cigarettes and a lighter, confirming what the marks on baby Jamie had already told them. A half-empty bottle of prenatal vitamins suggested she had, at some point, acknowledged her pregnancy before something changed. "Powell, in here," Morrison called from the bathroom. The medicine cabinet revealed prescription bottles for Emily, antidepressants that had been filled but never opened. A pregnancy test box, empty, lay crumpled in the trash can, and most disturbing, a diary hidden beneath towels in the linen closet, its most recent entry dated just 3 days before. "I can't do this again. Not without James. Not another child. To fail." Detective Powell closed the diary carefully, preserving potential evidence. Called the DA's office. "We're looking at potential criminal charges once she's medically stable." The chaos of the foster home had revealed its secrets. A family in silent free fall, with only a 6-year-old holding the pieces together. The fluorescent hospital lights cast long shadows across Emily Foster's face, highlighting the hollow cheeks and dark circles beneath her eyes. She lay still against the white sheets, IV lines delivering fluids and medication that kept her physically stable. But the emptiness in her gaze suggested a wound no medicine could reach. Harold sat beside her bed, the uncomfortable plastic chair creaking beneath his weight. Neither had spoken for several minutes. The truth about what had happened hung between them like a physical presence. "They found the marks on Jamie," Harold finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The burns, Emily. Why?" Emily's fingers twisted the thin hospital blanket. "I don't remember," she whispered, though her eyes told a different story. Everything was a blur. "Don't lie to me," Harold replied, not unkindly but firmly. "Not anymore. Too many lies have already damaged this family." Tears slipped silently down Emily's cheeks. He wouldn't stop crying. He came so fast and he wouldn't stop making noise. "I was afraid someone would hear, would take him away like they threatened to take Max if I couldn't get better." Harold's weathered hand trembled as he reached for her thin fingers. Who threatened to take Max? The school counselor. She saw the signs: Max coming in unwashed, missing lunches, falling asleep in class. She said if things didn't improve, they'd have to report us. Emily's voice grew increasingly desperate. "I couldn't let that happen. James would never forgive me." "So you hid the pregnancy? Didn't get prenatal care? Didn't prepare for Jamie's arrival?" Harold's questions contained no judgment, only a desperate attempt to understand. Emily nodded, shame evident in every line of her body. "I thought if no one knew, it wouldn't be real. Then when he came, I panicked. I couldn't think straight. The depression. It takes over sometimes, makes me see everything dark, makes me do things." Her voice trailed off. "Why send Max with the baby? Why not wake me?" "I was afraid," Emily whispered. "Afraid you'd see what I'd done. Afraid of what I might do next. Max was the only one I trusted to keep Jamie safe from me." The terrible truth settled between them. Emily Foster's depression had become a monster that consumed her rationality, turning a mother into someone capable of harming her newborn child, yet still aware enough to send her 6-year-old son into the night to save his brother's life. "They're going to charge me, aren't they?" Emily asked, her voice hollow. Harold couldn't lie. Yes, Detective Powell explained that the evidence, the deliberate nature of Jamie's injuries. They can't ignore it. "And the children?" "Max is with Ms. Phillips right now. Jamie will be discharged to foster care when he's strong enough." Harold's voice broke. "I tried to convince them I could care for them, but they have concerns. About my age, my medications." Emily closed her eyes, fresh tears tracking down her face. "When is James coming home?" "Tomorrow. His flight lands at 3:42. He'll hate me for what I've done." Harold sighed heavily. "He'll be heartbroken. We all are. But hate? No. He'll want to understand, to help you heal. The question is whether you want to heal, Emily." The pediatric wing of Portland Medical Center had been Max's temporary home for 3 days now. Though technically not a patient, the social workers had arranged for him to stay in a small room next to the nursery where Jamie was being monitored. A cot had been set up, colorful drawings now adorned the walls, and a collection of donated toys sat in the corner, attempts to create normalcy in an abnormal situation. Max sat cross-legged on the floor, arranging action figures in elaborate battle formation. His Superman pajamas had been replaced by new clothes, but he'd insisted on keeping his rain boots nearby, as if prepared for another midnight rescue. "Hey there, superhero," Nurse Williams said, poking her head in. "Someone's awake and might like to see his big brother." Max jumped up immediately, abandoning his toys without hesitation. "Can I hold him?" "Of course. You're practically a pro now." In the nursery, Jamie lay in a clear bassinet, no longer attached to the monitoring wires that had initially frightened Max. His tiny body was wrapped in a blue blanket, his dark eyes alert as they fixed on Max's approaching form. "Hi, Jamie," Max whispered, carefully climbing onto the rocking chair. "It's me again." Nurse Williams placed the baby in Max's waiting arms, adjusting his hold to support Jamie's head properly. "Remember, just like I showed you." Max nodded, solemnly. He'd taken to his role as big brother with remarkable seriousness, absorbing every instruction about holding, burping, and comforting with intense concentration. "Did the doctors fix his OEs?" Max asked, noticing the small bandages on Jamie's back through the hospital gown. Nurse Williams hesitated. "Yes, they're helping his OEs heal. He's going to be just fine." Max rocked gently, humming a tune his mother used to sing before the sadness took over. Jamie's eyes never left his brother's face, tiny fingers curling around Max's thumb with surprising strength. "Miss Phillips says Jamie needs to stay with a foster family for a while," Max said suddenly. "Why can't he just come home with me and Grandpa?" "Well," Nurse Williams began carefully, "sometimes families need extra help. Jamie needs special care right now, and the foster family is trained to give him that care." "I can take care of him," Max insisted. "I already did the hard part, bringing him through the rain." The nurse's heart clenched at his determined expression. "I know you did, sweetie. You were incredibly brave. But taking care of a baby is a big job, even for grown-ups." Max considered this, his forehead wrinkled in concentration. "Will I still get to see him?" "Miss Phillips is working very hard to make sure you do." Max nodded, seemingly satisfied with this answer. He leaned closer to Jamie, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "Don't worry, little brother. I'll still be your guardian, even if we live in different houses for a while. That's what big brothers do." The airport bustled with the usual chaos of arrivals and departures, but Max noticed none of it. His eyes remained fixed on the sliding doors where passengers from military transport flight 249 were emerging. Grandpa's hand rested on his shoulder, a gentle anchor amid the sea of strangers. "How will we recognize him?" Max asked, suddenly worried. "It's been so long." "He'll recognize us," Grandpa assured him. "A father never forgets his son's face." Max fidgeted with the handmade sign he'd insisted on creating. "Welcome home, Daddy," in bright red and blue crayon, decorated with stars and what was meant to be an American flag. After 3 attempts, the nurses had helped him get it just right, and then, suddenly, there he was. Major James Foster still wore his desert camouflage, his duffel bag slung over one shoulder. His face looked thinner than in the photos Max kept beside his bed, and new lines creased the corners of his eyes. But his smile, that was exactly as Max remembered. "Dad!" Max broke free from Grandpa's hold, dropping his sign as he sprinted across the terminal. James knelt, arms outstretched, catching his son in a fierce embrace that lifted Max clear off the ground. He buried his face in the boy's hair, shoulders shaking with emotion he'd held in check during the 20-hour journey. "Home. I've got you, buddy," he whispered. "I've got you now." Over Max's shoulder, James met his father's tear-filled eyes. The unspoken weight of everything that had happened hung in the air between them. Emily's breakdown, Jamie's injuries, Max's midnight journey through the storm. A family fractured, then shattered. "Jamie's at the hospital waiting to meet you," Max said, pulling back to look at his father's face. "He's really little, but Nurse Williams says he's a fighter, like us." James nodded, unable to speak past the lump in his throat. He hadn't seen his newborn son yet, only a grainy photo texted by the hospital social worker. A child born into trauma, bearing scars before he'd even lived. "And Mom?" Max asked hesitantly. James exchanged a glance with his father. They'd agreed to be honest with Max, but gentle. "Mom is in a different part of the hospital. She's very sick right now, not with a cold or flu, but with a sickness that affected her thoughts and feelings. The doctors are helping her." Max absorbed this information with the solemn maturity that had impressed everyone who'd met him since that rainy night. Is that why she hurt Jamie? James closed his eyes briefly, the pain of that reality still fresh. Yes, buddy, that's why. People who are sick like Mom sometimes do things they would never do if they were well. Can we see Jamie first? Max asked. I promised I'd visit him today. Of course. James stood, keeping one arm wrapped around Max's shoulders as they collected the abandoned welcome sign. Together, the three foster men walked toward the exit, a family incomplete but reunited, heading toward the tiny fighter who would complete their circle. The first time James Foster held his newborn son, the NICU fell silent. Nurses paused in their duties, watching as the uniformed soldier gently cradled Jamie, his calloused fingers tracing the tiny features with wonder. Max stood on tiptoes beside them, his face alight with pride at finally introducing his father to the brother he'd saved. "He has your eyes," James whispered, voice thick with emotion, "and your mother's nose." He understood enough. Mommy had been very sick, had hurt Jamie because of that sickness, but was getting better now. The district attorney spoke about justice for Jamie, about the burns that would leave faint scars, about a mother's sacred duty of protection. Emily's lawyer countered with medical testimonies about severe untreated depression, isolation, and the paradoxical fact that even in her darkest moment, Emily had the presence of mind to send Max to save Jamie's life. "Your Honor," Emily's lawyer concluded, "Mrs. Foster has complied with every requirement set forth by this court. Her doctors confirm significant progress in treatment. The children's welfare is paramount, but separating them permanently from their mother serves no one's best interest." Judge Martinez turned to Dr. Winters, Emily's psychiatrist. "In your professional opinion, does Mrs. Foster pose a continuing threat to either of her children?" Dr. Winters chose her words carefully. "With ongoing treatment, medication compliance, and the strong support system now in place, I believe Emily Foster can safely parent under supervised conditions, gradually transitioning to independent parenting as she demonstrates continued stability." The judge nodded, then surprised everyone by addressing Max directly. "Young man, you've shown extraordinary courage throughout these difficult months. I understand you visit your mother regularly. How do you feel when you're with her?" All eyes turned to Max, who sat straighter in his chair. "She's better now," he said simply. "She smiles more. She reads me stories like before, and she's really gentle with Jamie." Judge Martinez's face softened momentarily before returning to its professional neutrality. After a final consultation of his notes, he delivered his ruling. Emily would be placed on 3 years probation with mandatory continuing treatment. She could return home under supervised conditions with regular monitoring by Child Protective Services. Full custody would remain with James temporarily, with graduated visitation rights for Emily. The criminal charges were suspended pending successful completion of the treatment program. "This court believes in second chances, Mrs. Foster," Judge Martinez concluded. "Don't waste yours." As they left the courthouse, Max slipped his hand into Emily's for the first time in months, a family rebuilt, step by careful step. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting golden light across the breakfast table where the Foster family gathered. 1 year had passed since that rainy night when Max carried Jamie to safety. Jamie, now a sturdy toddler with curious eyes and a determined crawl, banged a plastic spoon against his high-chair tray, demanding more applesauce with an imperious "Ma-ma-ma" that made everyone smile. "Use your words, Jamie," Max instructed patiently, demonstrating with exaggerated clarity. "More, please." "Mo!" Jamie echoed, beaming at his brother's approval. Emily served another spoonful, her movements confident now after months of supervised parenting that had gradually given way to independence. The dark circles beneath her eyes had faded, replaced by the quiet alertness of a mother fully present. Her weekly therapy sessions continued, but the medication had been reduced as her stability increased. James watched his family with quiet gratitude. His transfer to the medical training center at Fort Williams had been approved. No more deployments, no more absences. Harold, seated at his usual place at the table, had become less the primary caregiver and more the beloved grandfather, his prescription bottles reduced to only the essential medications. "First grade presentation today, right, buddy?" James asked, noticing Max's nervous fidgeting with his toast. Max nodded, suddenly solemn. "Ms. Abernathy says I can talk about anything important to me. I picked bravery." The adults exchanged glances. Max rarely spoke directly about that night anymore, but its lessons had shaped him. In small ways, they saw it daily. His instinctive protectiveness toward Jamie, his watchful eyes that missed nothing, his quiet confidence when faced with challenges that made other 7-year-olds crumble. "That's a big topic," Emily said carefully. "What made you choose it?" Max shrugged with the easy nonchalance of childhood. "'Cause everybody has to be brave sometimes, even when they're scared, like when Dad helps hurt soldiers. Or when you fight your sad sickness, Mom, or when Grandpa decided to stop taking so many sleeping pills." The simple truth of it hung in the air, neither accusation nor praise, just a child's clear-eyed assessment of the world as he understood it. "And you?" Harold asked gently. "Where does your bravery come from?" Max considered this, his forehead crinkling in concentration. "I think maybe from Jamie," he said finally. "When someone needs you, you just do what you have to do." Emily's eyes filled with tears, but they were different now, clean tears, healing tears. James reached across the table to squeeze Max's hand. "Your presentation is going to be amazing," he said, "just like you." Later, as they waited for the school bus, Max stood on the front porch with Jamie balanced on his hip, pointing out birds and squirrels to his fascinated brother, two small silhouettes against the morning light, one who had carried the other through darkness, both now walking together toward brighter days. The autumn breeze rustled golden leaves across the elementary school playground as Jamie Foster took his uncertain first steps toward the big slide. At 2 years old, his round face was a perfect blend of his parents' features, with no visible trace of the scars that had once marked his tiny body. Max watched from nearby, alert and ready to intervene should his brother falter, the protective instinct now as natural as breathing. "Let him try on his own," Emily gently reminded, her hand resting lightly on Max's shoulder. "Remember what Dr. Chen said about fostering independence." Max nodded reluctantly, forcing himself to stay put as Jamie navigated the toddler playground. The entire Foster family had gathered for the fall festival, James in civilian clothes. Now that he'd completed his military service, Harold capturing everything on the camera he'd finally learned to use properly, and Emily, steady and present in a way that once seemed impossible. "He's just like you were at that age," James observed, standing beside Max, determined to conquer every challenge. The past 2 years had rewritten the Foster family story. Emily's treatment had progressed from supervised visits to full reintegration. The court case had closed with her successful completion of the treatment program. Harold had found purpose as the neighborhood's honorary grandfather, organizing a support group for grandparents raising grandchildren. James had transitioned to civilian life as a physician at Portland Medical Center, often collaborating with the same doctors who had saved his younger son. Max had grown, too, taller now, more confident, but retaining the old soul wisdom that had guided him through the rain that night. His school essay on bravery had won a statewide competition, though he remained uncomfortable with the attention it brought. He still slept with his bedroom door open, listening for Jamie even though the midnight needs had long passed. "Look, Max! Look!" Jamie called, reaching the top of the slide and beaming with pride. "I did it! Great job, buddy!" Max called back, then turned to his parents with a grin. He's not scared of anything. Wonder where he gets that from, Emily said, pulling Max into a sideways hug. As Jamie slid down with a squeal of delight, a familiar figure approached across the playground. Detective Powell, now Chief Powell, with a small gift bag in hand. I heard someone was having a birthday next week, she said, handing the package to Max. Inside was a silver medallion on a chain, a match to the one she'd given Max the previous year, but smaller, sized for a child. For Jamie, she explained. When he's old enough to understand the story of how his brother saved him, some things should be remembered, passed down. Max closed his fingers around the medallion, grateful for the tangible reminder of what they'd overcome. The road ahead remained imperfect. Emily still had difficult days. Harold's health required monitoring, and James sometimes woke from nightmares of what might have happened had circumstances been slightly different. But they walked that road together now, step by careful step, a family rebuilt by courage and second chances. As Jamie ran to join them, arms outstretched toward his brother, Max knelt to catch him, whispering the words that had become their private ritual. I've got you, little brother, always.